Well, it's very important because obviously we see the mega sports events as a way of people. They are traveling, they are consuming obviously travel, looking for experiences. So these moments where we look at World Cups, Grand Prix are significantly important, and we continue to see those growing. If you look at the overall sports segment in tourism, it represents almost one quarter of all travel-related tourism happening around the world, and it keeps growing. It's one of the fastest growing segments. So significantly important, and we'll continue to focus on it.
As a consumer, though, we're all very lucky. If I wanted to book a trip from Australia to Singapore for this weekend, I have so many options. I could book on Booking.com, I could book on Qantas Hotels, on What If, Kayak, Agoda, Expedia. I am spoilt for choice. How do you make sure that people go to Booking.com?
Yeah. Well, certainly there's choice. I think it's about also the timings to make the booking, because obviously the prices, as you mentioned, are already high, and particularly if you want to be close to the track, then you'll have to plan in advance, or you'll have to be willing to spend a bit more. First of all and foremost, we're looking to connect the customers with the experiences. So in our platform, you are able to book your flight. You can also book your hotel and book any experiences related to Formula One or outside of Formula One. So I think the great part is that you have a one-stop shop where possible to book your entire Grand Prix experience, from accommodation to your restaurants and to your travel. And that's exactly what also people are doing, and we continue to see so. And particularly it's important when we look at last year's Grand Prix, we see the same amount of traction and the same amount of consumers, particularly all the countries in Asia Pacific, inter-regional, willing and wanting to travel to Singapore to see the Grand Prix live.
Hi, Nuno, Monica here. What do we know about who exactly is coming for the race this weekend? Where are the travelers flying in from?
Yeah. Well, the interesting part is that it has not changed versus 2022. So if you look at the top 5 countries, and if we exclude obviously Singapore and all the domestic market that also wants to see the game, see the Grand Prix sports, then we'll look at Australia as our #1 market, Japan #2, India, followed by USA. So you can see we do have travels coming from Asia, all across Asia Pacific, but we already start to see US #5 and UK #6. And then you have some of the European countries too, followed by some Asia Pacific countries, where then you have more inter-regional flights coming over. But this is exactly the same top as it was in 2022. So we see that the willing and the desire for travel hasn't happened.
So, Nuno, I'm looking there. I see Singapore at the top. Maybe those are people planning staycations. But what I'm not seeing there is a lot of our Southeast Asia neighbors. But for Malaysia, is F1 a big event for Southeast Asian travelers?
Absolutely, it is. I think if you look, Malaysia is more towards the bottom 10. Obviously, the prices and the surge of prices that we see in Singapore will deter some travelers if they were not able to plan ahead. So what we have seen is the signals of the countries where obviously the buying power is more significant. They are the first ones to book, but then we have a slew of countries, probably more at the bottom of our top 10 or below that, where we start to see Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, all those travelers also wanting to come to Singapore.
Nuno, another noticeable omission from that list is China. Is that speaking to the fallout from the pandemic and the economic slowdown that we're seeing there and the impact on the consumer and travelers?
I think the desire from Chinese travelers, when we look at our APEC confidence index that we have done this year, it's not dampened. So Chinese customers are one of the top ones that want to travel. I think it relates more to the capacity of outbound flights that we have at the moment, coming from China into Singapore and other destinations, and the prices. So it's a bit of both the number of seats and availability and prices that dampen a bit that demand. But as we see the flights recovering till the end of the year, at least at 50% capacity, if not more, coming from China, we expect probably after F1 and potentially for next year F1, certainly China to be back again on the top list of those travelers that want and are coming to see F1.
Nuno, we've been talking a lot about how music has become such a motivator for travel, as particularly Taylor Swift's concert that will be, all of her concerts are here in Singapore. How would you, if you had to put it head-to-head, music or sports, which one is the bigger motivator right now for travelers in the world?
Both. Definitely, it's about the experience. So what travelers are looking at the moment, if it's big sports events up to big music events, certainly I think music drives a lot of searches. But when we look at the amount of consumers actually traveling and staying, we see both. I think it depends on the capacity of the events per se, but we see both events capturing a lot of both minds and hearts of our travelers, and we expect to continue. We have not seen a change versus last year, so we're not just anymore talking about pent-up demand. Travel has been roaring back, and we're not seeing any signals of changing also this year and for next year.
Okay, and if we take it back to F1 for just a minute, we know Japan is next, the Japanese Grand Prix. Do you have any sort of numbers to compare international travel coming to Singapore versus Tokyo?
Yeah, I think it's a bit early because we'll be able to compare the final numbers just after the Grand Prix. But when we look at sports events, and we were just coming off the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, and the fact that we saw surges of search of 180% for domestic consumers and over 70% year-over-year increase in terms of international user searches for those destinations. We expect nothing less also coming up to Japan. And I think people will always tie in both their desire to watch the Grand Prix, but also tying it with potentially exploring the beautiful country, either Singapore or Japan when they travel there. So we expect to see similar levels of high demand, both domestic and international coming up, not just for Singapore as we've seen, but Japan also.